Good morning. I am Monique Claiborne, President and CEO of Greater Portland, Inc. Greater Portland, Inc. is a regional economic development organization and is the only public-private partnership recruiting companies to the bi-state metro area. This is a key election for our region, and there are 3 candidates officially vying for the Oregon governor's seat. We invited them here today to talk to them to tackle issues that are critical to the state's economic growth. Here with me today is Tina Kotek. Tina served in the Oregon House of Representatives for 15 years, representing North and Northeast Portland. She was the Speaker of the House from 2013 to 2022, and she is a Democratic nominee for governor. Thank you, Tina, for joining me.
Thank you, Monique, and very pleased to be here and really appreciate the great work that Greater Portland Inc. does. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll just jump right in. The Greater Portland region is the state's economic driver, but it's losing its appeal as a good place to live and work due to increased crime, homelessness, and trash. What would you do as governor to restore Greater Portland's vibrancy?
Well, thank you for starting off with this question. I think it's very critical for the future of our state that the Greater Portland area, the metro area, is successful, is vibrant. Look, I live in Portland. I live in North Portland with my wife. I feel it, I see it every day of what changes have happened in our city and what is, causing a lot of us distress about seeing our neighbors living on the streets, seeing, the increase in crime and violent crime and gun crimes, and then just, how the city looks around trash. So this is a really important question because what is essential is that the Greater Portland area has to be successful for the entire state to be successful. At the end of the day, we're not, we're 4 million plus people here in our state. What happens in Portland really drives economic interest in the state, drives investment that benefits the entire state. So this isn't just a local issue, this is a statewide issue. And so therefore, the governor has a large role to play in making sure the area can be successful. And the reason I'm running for governor is I'm a problem solver. I want things to be better. I want things to work better for everybody. So the issues that you are raising are very important to me because of, making sure we can all be successful as a state. So first off, as governor, my job would be to help hold all levels of government accountable. And I'm very, what you talked about in the public-private collaboration that Greater Portland Inc. and other organizations are trying to bring together. What is the role of the public side to be a good partner? And that means being accountable, being transparent, breaking down the silos so people can work together. So let's talk about, let's start off with crime. Certainly large cities around the country are dealing with this, but we are seeing significant levels of increased crime in the Portland area that need to be addressed. And a lot of this is driven by increases in drug addiction related to meth and the presence of fentanyl and fentanyl-laced products. And so I think one of the things the governor can do, and what I will do, is work directly with our U.S. federal partners to take on reducing the amount of drugs that are on our streets, going after the drug cartels, working with local law enforcement for interdiction. It's really, really important to do that. You have to do both the pipeline of the drugs as well as helping people who are in an addictive state actually get the help they need. In terms of local law enforcement to help, the state manages the classes, the training classes for certification that officers have to go through. If we need to, and I think we do, let's get more classes. Let's get more training opportunities. So if we are having a workforce issue, it's not a pipeline problem in terms of the certification classes. That is something very specific that the governor can do. And then lastly, being a collaborator, a convener, listening to what people on the ground and local communities need as it relates to public safety, and being a strong partner to help make those things happen. That I think is a very important role of the governor, because at the end of the day, the governor needs to keep people safe, and how people feel and see and feel safe in their communities affects the economic vitality of the area. Let's talk about homelessness. None of us want to see our neighbors living on the streets. I have a plan on my website that goes from the immediate to the long term. Immediately, we have to increase the number of street outreach teams that are going tent by tent to talk with people, to build relationships, to help connect people to services, help people get into transitional shelter and then into permanency. That is going to take more coordinated, facilitated work on the ground. And I'm very committed to doing that. My plan talks about ending homelessness for individuals in particular who are veterans, seniors, people with kids, young people coming out of foster care. Those are some very specific populations I think we should focus on right away to reduce the number of individuals living on the streets. And we have to build more housing. And I'm hoping we'll talk about that today. The larger issue of housing, workforce housing, low-income housing, housing across the board is an issue for the entire state, and particularly urgent in the metro area. And then I think in your question, you mentioned trash. Look, when I've been asked by the city or the county to do more, I was always there like, does ODOT need more money to clean up trash along their properties? Absolutely. What we can do locally, I think, is helping individuals who need some employment to get connected to employment to help clean up the communities we're living in. How we see our community, what we do around the trash issues really does help us feel better about where we live. And I think that creates a safer community in and of itself. So I think we can do more there. And I certainly want the state to be a partner with Metro and the city and counties to make sure we are dealing with all of our trash issues as soon as possible. And finally, I just want to say that we all love this community. I live in Portland. I love this state, and we're very excited about, I think for those of us who live here, what the Portland area means to us. I am never going to disparage our city nationally. I'm always going to be a chief cheerleader saying we can bring people here, we can have a vibrant community, a safe community. And it's frustrating to me to hear at least one person who's running for the seat talking disparagingly about the city of Portland in particular. That's not what a leader does, and I will not do that for our state. I will always be out there promoting us, traveling wherever I need to bring people here to build economic development so we can have the city that we need for the entire state. So thank you.
Thank you. That's a great answer. So this question comes from our interview sponsor, Moss Adams. What are your 3 top economic priorities, and how do you plan to address them?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, first off, it is engaging with the private sector to make sure that as we recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, that we are building an economy that does work for everyone, and trying to figure out for the folks, the employers on the ground, what they need. And I have been speaking to a lot of employers, particularly those in downtown Portland, trying to figure out how we all navigate this change in the workplace from completely in person to hybrid and what that means for our downtown core. So I really want to be engaging and listening to the business community to figure out how we work together to build that economy that is coming out of this pandemic recession, because we will need private-public partnerships to take on our most immediate issues. And those for me are the lack of affordable workforce housing, our acute labor shortages in particular sectors. And I think something that is important for the whole state is our uneven coverage of broadband service. So I want to talk about those 3 individually. So let's talk about housing costs. I've heard this directly from employers. High housing costs, whether it's ability to rent or own in the greater Portland area, is a significant issue. And that's particularly related to supply. And I think many folks will know that I've done work at the legislature to really understand what our housing supply situation is. It is part of our land use system. We need to know what it is. And I have worked on legislation to require local government to understand what their supply needs are going forward and really having some very specific targets. We are going to have to work together to build more housing. And that includes new strategies for financing more housing projects, increasing the construction workforce. I mean, who's going to build all this new housing that we need? And frankly, removing the red tape and streamlining the permitting processes that are necessary to build quicker. And I think we can do this. And what it will take is a governor who's very focused on this and bringing urgency to the issue. And that is one of my top priorities. And it's also obviously an economic issue for our businesses and employers. Let's talk about workforce. Workforce development is a key issue. What I'm hearing is the ability to upskill Oregonians who want to move into different fields. And so for me, one of the particular 2 things that I'm going to be focused on is supporting our pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs that can help people get into these skilled trades that are needed. The other issue is supporting our community colleges. The way we fund our community colleges doesn't make a lot of sense because we ask them to be there on the ready to provide opportunities for people to skill up for new jobs, but then we don't fund them in a way that allows them to be sustainable. We really do need to talk about our community colleges, and we should be proud about Portland Community College. It's the largest community college in the state. I think it does wonderful work, and we have to make sure they are sustainable and can be there on the ready when we are looking to bring Oregonians from one type of job to another. And that's the kind of transformation in the economy that we're seeing, and we have to be more supportive of that. And then lastly, well, no, actually, there's another issue. We need to talk about childcare. We need to talk about affordable, accessible childcare. We saw in the pandemic how big of an issue that was. That is a significant part of the workforce challenges we're having. And I've done a lot of early childhood work in many years as an advocate in the Capitol. So I'll be focusing on our programs that support working parents to have more access to affordable childcare and supporting the providers themselves who we've been trying to keep working and being there during the pandemic. Those are small businesses that need the support of the state in new and more sustainable ways. So that will be a focus for me. And then let's talk about broadband coverage, maybe not as big of an issue in the greater Portland area, but not completely consistent coverage all over the greater metro area. So we have to make sure it's there. We have learned, obviously, through the pandemic, how important it is to have access to consistent internet service. And if we're going to have economic vitality across the state, we have to use the new federal dollars, particularly to make sure we get rid of all those gaps where people don't have coverage. So people will have options about where they work. And that will be good for employers as well to have that consistency of internet service across the state. So those are the top issues when I think about economic issues for me in the first couple of years of my administration.
Nice to hear you talk about economic development. So we all need to row in the same direction to ensure existing companies stay and grow here. As governor, how will you ensure alignment across state agencies, particularly Business Oregon, the Bureau of Labor and Industries, and other departments of revenue and energy, in support of business retention and expansion in our core industries, such as semiconductor, apparel and outdoor, software, and food and beverage?
This is a really great question, because one of the things that a governor has the most influence on is how state agencies are working together in an intentional, strategic way. And making sure I have the right staff in my office, making sure we have regular, ongoing interagency collaboration with the agencies that you have mentioned. And for example, while the Bureau of Labor and Industries has an independently elected leader, I look forward to working with the new labor commissioner, whoever that is, to make sure that is what is happening in Boley aligns up with what is OSHA's needing to do, what Business Oregon is trying to do to expand businesses. And I really like the focus on supporting the businesses who are here. Look, I think recruiting new businesses and new investment is important. But we have some great companies here that need to be supported to go to the next level of development, that kind of second and third stage development that sometimes we're really good at, like at the very beginning, to get people off the ground and helping entrepreneurs, although we could always do more. But when people have been established, we kind of like, well, you're on your own. We know that even a smaller company with 25 to 50 employees needs extra capital, extra support to kind of go to that next level. And I think that is a role for Business Oregon and all the state agencies working together to remove barriers to growth. Certainly there are regulations on the books for very important reasons. Like, how can we streamline? Can we as a government be consumer oriented towards the customers we're trying to serve, and in this case, helping our businesses grow. I did talk about some of the biggest barriers I'm seeing around housing, labor shortages, and broadband. I think what I want to do as governor is create an organizational culture at the state level where we are really engaging in innovation, private-public partnerships, taking risks, trying new things, really discussing our procurement policies, things that can modernize what state government does in a way that can be an advantage and a value add for our businesses and economic development. Right now, I think we need urgency, transparency, steady leadership at the state. And that's what I've been doing as Speaker of the House for 9 years, running a legislative branch, providing that stability and leadership. It's what I want to bring to the executive. because we have to stop making excuses about why things aren't working. We just need to get them done. We need to make sure things can work and fix problems. And that's really the energy I want to bring into the whole situation.
Great, thank you. So we talked retention and expansion, which are core. Business attraction. What is your short and long-term strategy to attract domestic and international companies to the state and Greater Portland?
Yep. Well, one of the things that's important to me, and I think a key role for the governor, is to be that ambassador to other countries that we export to. We do manufacture a lot in the state of Oregon and particularly in the Greater Portland area. So having experience working along the Pacific Rim to increase trade partnerships, I think is important. Really expanding our trade partnerships with Europe, not just relying on our Pacific Rim partners. I did, as Speaker of the House, lead a trade mission to China a few years ago, and it was a very helpful experience to understand what is necessary for the really unique products that we have in Oregon, promoting them overseas, talking about removing barriers, developing those relationships. That is something in particular I think we can do more of, and something I'm looking forward to doing more of, because those relationships you develop outside of Oregon, either nationally or internationally, are going to be very important to promoting our economic growth. I think one of the things that I will say about recruiting and retaining is really listening to business leaders about what they need and being responsive to that. I want to give one example. You know, when we were at the very early stages of the COVID pandemic, I heard very specifically from businesses that with the unprecedented layoffs that they were dealing with, I mean, like literally businesses stopped. People had to be laid off because we couldn't have people working. Everybody was very concerned about what it was going to mean for the unemployment, you know, the payroll taxes related to unemployment benefits that were going to happen in the future because of that just significant change in employment and unemployment during the pandemic. And so I sat down and said, let's put some legislators together and figure this out. So with my leadership, we did pass a bill that provided certainty going forward for our businesses about what their payroll tax situation was going to be. We actually ensured nearly $100 million in tax relief for businesses in 2021. And we will be reducing payroll taxes by about $2.5 billion over the next 10 years, because we were able to modify our unemployment insurance trust fund, but still keep it solvent. That came from business concerns. I took it, ran with it, and made sure we got it done. That's the kind of feedback and response the business community can expect from me, because that is the partnership I want to have with our businesses. And lastly, I talk a lot about, you know, very proud to be saying we should make things in America. I want to make more things in Oregon. And so supporting light and large manufacturing is going to be a key issue for me. And I'm, you know, glad to see the work of the CHIPS task force in terms of giving us specific recommendations of what we can do to continue to support our semiconductor industry as well in the Greater Portland area.
Thank you. And so I think that's a good segue into the next question. What came out of the semiconductor task force recommendations, and I sat on the subcommittee for taxes and incentives, were a number of recommendations for incentives and how we can expand in the state. So what kind of political capital do you have to move a large economic incentives package?
Well, I think my experience as Speaker of the House is very applicable here. As I mentioned, I served as Speaker for 9 years, the longest Speaker in Oregon's history. That was never the intent, but that's where I ended up. And that meant really learning how to listen and work with very diverse interests to craft solutions that we could get done. And I think you can have political impact if you work hard and actually get into the details and work with people in a very authentic and transparent way. And that's what I've done as Speaker. That's what I'll do as Governor. It's really important. The details matter about how things actually are implemented. Again, one of the reasons I'm running is I've worked on some very comprehensive, important legislation in the state. I want to make sure we follow through on the promises that we've been making sure that we can implement things, making sure things are reaching the outcomes that we said we would do. A perfect example is the Student Success Act. I can talk this morning. The Student Success Act. We had a 30-year funding problem here in the state. We needed to have more resources for our schools, but not just more money for money's sake. We needed to make sure we had resources to improve our graduation outcomes, fully fund career and technical education, make additional investments in early childhood. I worked 2 to 3 years to make sure we could come up with a way to bring more money into our schools, do it in an accountable fashion, and craft a ongoing funding stream that will support our schools. Now, as hopefully the next governor, I will be the superintendent of public instruction. I need to follow through on that promise and say, look, new money is coming into our school system. Are we getting the outcomes we've asked for? And I think when we talk about political leverage, whether it's something like the Student Success Act or supporting an expansion and maintenance of our semiconductor industry, it is about understanding all of the details, understanding the different needs. And then at the point where the conversation has reached, making a decision and following through on the implementation. That is how we actually make progress in the state. And it's something I'm looking forward to doing as our next governor.
Thank you. And so last question. Oregon is missing out on well-paying jobs due to a lack of large parcels of land. Often we're not even in the running for large business recruitment projects, as detailed in the statewide semiconductor task force recent report. What's your plan to alleviate land scarcity and provide resources for site readiness?
This is a very important question. For me, I think I would start off by saying I approach complex problems as always both and conversations. Like, can we have things where both sides get what they need? Not an either or, it's either this or that. I don't believe it's an either or conversation when it comes to land use. We as Oregonians believe and love our land use system. We want to protect what we hold dear, our farms, our forests, our oceans, our mountains. The land use system is really important to Oregonians. And it was meant to evolve with the situation of growth in our state. Housing is a perfect example. We've had on the books housing goals under Goal 10 of our land use system. We have to continue to meet the goals of that aspect of our system and have very strategic goals about increasing housing within our urban growth boundaries. We do have to have a conversation about maintaining our industrial land. I've been a strong supporter of maintaining our current industrial land capacity. I've represented North and Northeast Portland for 15 years. Rivergate, Port of Portland, Columbia Corridor businesses, PDX, understanding that those industrial lands are really important. Now, these aren't the types of parcels that like an Intel in Ohio we're looking for. That is a little more challenging. And it's not impossible. I think we have to focus on, and we have some super siting laws that allow us, based on a set of criteria, to move quicker in terms of siting things and preparing infrastructure to create new industrial land opportunities. It will take collaboration and deep conversation and holding both our land use values and our economic goals side by side. I will say, I do think it's important to grow some of these large parcels and build the infrastructure and workforce in other parts of the state. I think that could be more realistic. And I'm very bullish about the work that's happening on the South Coast around offshore wind, a new container terminal at the Port of Coos Bay. We have to be promoting economic growth in all parts of the state because we might not be able to have the type of industrial parcels we need in the metro area, but that doesn't mean they aren't in different places. So I believe in finding creative solutions, working with people, and making smart strategic choices about what incentives would be helpful, but also balancing that with making sure we can pay for essential services. So I look forward to the challenges to make this happen, but I think we have to continue to grow as a state, and we will have to address how we make sure we have industrial land that's ready for growth.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate your time today and your thoughtful response to our questions. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you, and have a great day.